thank you for your wonderful time you will spare with us and share with us. And just to give a formal introduction about Dr. C. Shanmugam sir, he started his career at Annamalai University. He done his master's of linguistics, and his PhD is from the Deccan College, Pune, and his field is semantics as well as syntax. Apart from that, he started his career at Mysore, University of Mysore, and his contribution to the language of Kannada is enormous. And later he joined as a reader in Bharatiya University, Coimbatore, the Department of Linguistics. And of course, he was the co-founder, you can say, after he was in hand with Dr. K. Karnagaran sir, we all know. As his contribution being here in same field, apart from his this specialization, pragmatics, ELT, and discourse analysis also includes to his credit. And he was a member of many academic and non-academic bodies, boards. He has published many international and national journals. And to his credit, he has visited many foreign countries like Germany, USA, Canada, Japan, etc., which and is a founder to this SAP in the Department of Linguistics, which is a very big credit to the department, which still we are running with enormous energetic thing and its continuation with all the support. I mean, most of the professors who are present here were our pillars of this department, and they keep continuing giving their supports. And we are very happy, sir. You all people are with us, and we still expect you to guide us in all our features. And Professor has got a turning point as a book on Pornmayal and pragmatics, and in pragmatics also his books. So there are a lot of feathers which Professor has to his credit, but still we do time constraint. So I'm not able to add up all the credits what Professor has, but still we all know him very well. So now I welcome Dr. C. Shanmugam sir to deliver talk on perspectives on translation this afternoon. Thank you, sir. Please.
And I would like to thank Professor V. Subramaniam and all the colleagues, Professor Ramesh, Vijayan, then Sundarabanu, then Shankar Ganesh, all these people, they are always integrating us in all their programs, and it is a credit for the people who are retired people. So I thank this opportunity for giving me this wonderful opportunity to deliver on translation. And also I am indebted to them for bringing me here so that I could see all my old friends and my colleagues, and it is a happy occasion. I cherish it. Now for the last, now let me go to the other topic. Now for the last 1 week, you have been taught a lot of things about translation, particularly the role of machine translation, the role of human translation, etc. So you have got a lot of ideas about the problems you encounter while you are making the machine do whatever things you want to do, and also got some idea about how to make the machine understand the problem of that and do the actual activity of translation. Now, to be a little bit away or deviant from this, I am looking at the perspectives of translation from this social and societal point. So, machine aspect I will be touching upon, and I will be concentrating how these translation studies and theories have gone through various stages, and it has culminated in the present day translation, namely machine translation. So I'm talking about the societal and sociological perspectives of this translation. So first thing I would like to talk is the impact of worldview on translation. Now, worldview is considered to be the way in which we perceive and conceive the world. That is, the perception and the conception of the world is actually culminating in worldview. For example, the perception and conception will be different. If you look at linguistic studies, you'll find that human beings are able to perceive the color. Even 8,000 color hues, the human being is able to recognize. But when we talk about the conception of the color, you will find 4 or 5 colors. For example, in English, you have 7 colors. In Tamil, old Tamil, if you look at, you have 4 colors only: Venmai, Karumai, Chemmai, Pasumai. So the conception of the color is different, but the perception is different. So likewise, every nation or every society, every culture has some kind of worldview. I'm giving one example. Virundu Puratha Thanundal considered to be a worldview in Tamils. Virundu Puratha Thanundal. That is, keeping the guest outside and eating inside is not a good behavior, even if the food is considered to be one which provides you the longevity of your life. விருந்து புறத்த தானுண்டல் சாவா மருந்து என்று end of part. So I consider this as a world view of Tamils. That is, giving or treating the guest is considered to be the important aspect of the human being's family. The second point is world view influences our expression and action. Action, if you take the concept of action, the world view actually controls your action. Suppose you are coming out of your house and you are going to travel somewhere. When you are coming out, if a person is coming with firewood on his head, you will immediately stop. You will stop, you will go inside the house, drink a cup of water, and then you proceed. This is because of your worldview. That is, your travel, you stopped going out because of the fact that somebody is coming with a firewood. That means firewood is considered to be a bad woman. So you do that. So your action is controlled by the type of influence from the world. Now, worldview is the basis for positive and negative stereotypes. What do you mean by stereotypes? Stereotypes are certain prejudices you have against other society, other nation, other people, etc. In American society, you find a lot of stereotypes. For example, they say that Chinese are those who will eat anything that creeps. This is one kind of stereotype, the Western stereotype. And the Canadians are boring type of people. And the French people are always logical and intelligent or something like that. So Americans, if they say that they are liberal. So in that way, you have some conception about the people, the society, the nation, etc. We also have that, for example, Telugu is a language. With reference to language, we say Telugu language is a beautiful language because it is nice to hear the Lulu patterns. And Malayalam is considered to be a language where people will be speaking through nose. So in that way, you have different types of stereotypes. Some kind of prejudiced views are maybe good or sometimes bad. So stereotypes may be about the culture, about the people, about the language, etc. So second point I would like to, the point I want to emphasize is worldview is one of the important factors influencing the theory of translation and the practice of translation. Now, Western worldview I'm talking about 2 worldviews, Western and the Indian perspective. Western worldview, man is considered to be an imperfect person and God is considered to be perfect. The reason why they consider man as imperfect, because Adam and Eve did not obey God and there was a downfall for Adam and Eve. So from that day onwards, humanity was striving to get the perfection so that they can regain the Garden of Eden. But this did not happen. So they have a view that man is man is imperfect, God is perfect. Man will be always sinners and they drive to get salvation. So salvation is the ultimate aim. So salvation you cannot directly get. So we sometimes engage a clergy for getting salvation. Whatever wrong things or sins you have done, if you communicate that one with the clergy will be in a position to plead for you with God. So that conception is a Western worldview. It has an impact over the translation aspect. The original text is perfect and translated text is imperfect. Whatever may be the modifications you make in a translation, it will be always imperfect. So people wanted to have perfection in translation. There is a drive for perfection in translation. This drive actually made them to search for perfect equivalence for source language text elements in target language. So perfect equivalence search is considered to be an important outcome of this worldview of perfection or imperfection. So when you are in a position to get perfect equivalence, you have achieved perfection in translation. That means you are maintaining the fidelity in translation. Fidelity means faithfulness. So if you want to be faithful, you should be faithful to the original text. You should be faithful in searching the perfect equivalence of the source language in the target language. So regarding faithfulness and fidelity, some jocular elements are there. For example, some people say taking human beings, particularly females, ladies, they say if the lady is faithful, she will not be beautiful. If she is beautiful, she will not be faithful. So the same thing is applied to translation. If you want to make the translation as an entertaining one, a beautiful one, it is a nice with a lot of figurative expression, etc., fidelity will be lost. If you are keeping fidelity as the base, then the beauty in translation will be lost. And another type of jocular thing is translation is just like kissing a lady with a parda, keeping a lady with a veil. So this is another. So some type of notations or some kind of jocular things are also given about translation. And what the Western view consider as translation is that there is no room for freedom or variation in translation. You are not permitted to have freedom and allow variation in translation according to the Western worldview. Translated texts are considered to be invariant forms of the source text, not variant forms. So Western worldview is meant for translation, and that was strict translation, maintaining faithfulness or fidelity in translation. So this actually led to the creation of different types of equivalences. So, for example, Catro talks about textual equivalence and formal correspondence. That means textual meaning equivalence, formal means formal grammatical type of correspondence. Then Naida talks about formal equivalence, which is concerned with form, and dynamic equivalence. He also included one more thing, that the translation that you are making, the text that you are translating should evoke the same kind of response that the original had evoked in the hearer. So he had taken reader response also as a factor in dynamic equivalence. And Peter Newmark talks about sense equivalence and communicative equivalence. Sense equivalence will be meaning equivalence, and communicative means what are the intentions of the author that has to be captured in the equivalence. So talking about communicative equivalence. Indian worldview, if you take, Indian worldview says that human soul is eternal. Man, the soul does not die, it lives ever, and body is transient or body perishes. That means the soul takes different forms, different bodies, and it will exist, continue to exist. This is otherwise called as a reincarnation of the soul in different bodies. That is, the soul gets reincarnation in several bodies and different bodies. This is because of the worldview, another worldview, that time is cyclic in the Indian conception. It is rotating. So you have rebirths, reincarnation, etc. Cyclically it will be occurring. Whereas the Western worldview, it is longitudinal. Time is longitudinal. You have birth and you have death. That there ends the matter. So whatever you want to do, you do it in that time period. But Indian conception is cyclic. So even if you are doing certain wrong things, you don't bother. In the next birth, you can do right. So that type of conception is there. So this actually led to what we call as multiplicity and diversity and heterogeneity in forms. So in this multiplicity you can find in God. God has different type of reincarnations. You have different type of parties available in our country, for caste, community, religion, all these based on that. You have religion, different types of religions are there, heterogeneous multiplicity of religions. Rituals, even rituals, for example, we take religious rituals. Suppose you are asking something, a boon from God, what are the things you offer? Sometimes you offer your hair, sometimes you offer food for others, and you will be rolling around the corridor of the temples, and sometimes you will eat mud, etc. So in that way, different ways in which you can satisfy God, and you do the rituals. Even yoga is considered to be multiple in nature. You have Hatha yoga, Raja yoga, Karma yoga, etc. So worldview, Indian worldview is actually for multiplicity, for heterogeneity, and for divisions. So accordingly, you find first text is one birth. Translated text is another birth. Translated text is a reincarnation of the source text in another birth. That means multiplicity and diversity will definitely exist in translation and translated text. They are not interested in merely for the equivalence in mere form and sense. Indians are using the concept of rasa. That means the emotional response has to be taken. The original text, when you are translating it, what type of emotional response it evoked, that has to be taken care of in the translated text. And they also are concerned with the dhvani, a network of meanings. For example, pun, polysemy, symbolism, and metaphor, all these things, the stylistic aspect. All these things are to be preserved. Intuition has to be taken care of. For example, it will not be found in your meaning or in your text. Text may be fully formed, meaning may be fully formed, but the intuition the readers get will not be there. A translator should take care of the intuition also. And translation is broadly classified as a recreation or transcreation, not translation. So there is room for freedom and variation in translation. And translation is recreation. In fact, so first point I discussed, worldview has some impact over translation. The second point is impact of domination over translation. Domination. A simple definition of domination is one suppressing the other or one curtailing the freedom of other. Here one means it may be a nation, it may be a race, it may be a political group or a religious group or male, etc. So we find different types of dominations. You have national domination, racial, political, religious, gender domination, male, female domination. All these things we find. And one of the important outcome of this domination is creation of opposition. You have opposition, for example, the main opposition is ego and other. Ego means I am, other means anybody else. So the same thing you find in translation also. Ego translation means my faith, my literature, my social values, etc. Other means other type. So there is some kind of opposition that is high and low, that type of thing, white and black. You have educated, uneducated, that literary, colloquial. This type of division is there. And the division, this one aspect, the domination leads to imposition. That is keeping certain values, etc., which are aligned to some people on them. So you have religious imposition, you have political imposition, etc. Ultimately, it leads to discrimination. For example, we have racial discrimination, women discrimination, etc. As far as the domination in Indian scene is concerned, you have Sanskrit domination or Orient domination, Mughal domination, and colonial domination. All these dominations will have some kind of impact over translation and Sanskrit domination. If you take the basic tenet you find in Sanskrit domination is prohibition of literacy. Literacy is not given to all the people. It is given only to a section of the population. So with the result, you find that literacy is not there. all the local or vernacular languages or the creations could not be translated because people are not getting literacy in those days. Prohibition of translation of epics and Vedic hymns were there. The reason is the Vedic hymns, they were in oral form and there was no translation. And the epics were not translated or allowed to be translated because of the sacred nature of these texts. So there was no allowance made for that. And for that, there was a revolt against the Sanskrit orthodoxy because the Sanskrit of Aryan orthodoxy prevented giving people education, prevented people to translate. And there was a revolt in Sanskrit against the Sanskrit orthodoxy. You find the translation of Ramayana and Pali by Bhaumacharya in 4th AD. What he had done is he had translated because every one is translating, multiplicity of epics will be there. You find Ramayana being translated in all vernacular languages, Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, everywhere you will find. So there, what he had done, Bhaumacharya, he had considered or he had presented Ravana as a good fellow. And the other original text, he is considered to be a demon or he is considered to be a virtueless person. Ramayana, in Pali Ramayana, Ravana was considered to be a good person. And the Hanuman is considered to be a person only, not monkey. So considering something as Rakshasa, as someone as a monkey, the elite culture actually degraded the status of the people. And that degradation is reverted in the Ramayana of Pali in the 4th century itself. So domination, against the domination, you will find different type of revolts also in the history. And what are the major effects you find? Loans from Sanskrit. Nowadays, you will find in almost all Indian languages are flooded with the Sanskrit loan forms. You have Tatsama and Tatbhava, etc. Tatbhava means more like Sanskrit. It is like Sanskrit only. Tatsama means you try to modify it according to the local color, local culture, etc. So Tatsama, for example, Rama, R will not be pronounced initially or will not be written. So you will convert this into Eram and E with E. Even Shakespeare is transcribed as Sehapiriya. So that is the way in which you localize the item Tat Sama. And another impact is Manipravala style in commentaries. I give one a small example. Munnurukal, you find the Sanskrit words involved there. Munnurukal, Brahma Empirumane Nevel Sevika Virumbi Muyandran. ஜன்மாந்திர பாவத்தால் காரியம் கைகூடவில்லை. மிக வருந்தி பாரத தேசத்திற்கு வந்து அருந்தவம் புரிந்தார். ஆகாயத்தில் ஒரு அசரீரி வாக்கு பிறந்தது. சத்திய விரதம் என்னும் க்ஷேத்திரம் சென்று சுத்தி கிரியை யாக வேதியாக கொண்டு அஸ்வவேத யாகம் புரியுமாறு அது கட்டளையிட்டது. You find all the words. Sometimes you may not be kshetram, of course, satya, brahm, all this you can understand, but Sanskrit mixing is there. So that is because of the domination. And the major aspect of translation is no one was allowed to translate anything because the things are in the elite culture and the non-dominant culture or suppressive culture are not allowed to translate. Now we are coming to the third aspect, colonial domination on translation. That is because of the Westerners, the conquest of Westerners in India. They brought, the history of all that. Now, projection of European values and rejection of native values. And that is one of the reasons where the translations were not encouraged for translating the native text, but only the foreign texts were translated. Bible translation in the regional language is one of the important aspects which brought for religious propaganda and religious conversion. Religious propaganda. Even there in Bible translation, also in the early translations, you find Sanskrit words are being used. For example, in one of the chanting in the church, you say, Paramandalangalil irukkum engal pudave, ummudaiya namam parisuthaப்படுvadaga, ummudaiya rajyam varuvadaga, ummudaiya sittam. Likewise it goes. So there you will find a lot of Sanskrit words were used because of the fact or because of the feeling that the translators consider Sanskrit as an important aspect. Sanskrit was actually the dominant language. So if you translate Bible with the Sanskrit things included in the translation, it will reach the people. That is what they consider. So that is also an effect of the domination. Then Bible or religious propaganda was there. Then distortion of place names they translated. For example, Otvenkal Nandre, they have translated as Uti or Uttakamant. You have Sadurangapattinam translated as Sadras, Tiruvananthapuram translated as Trivandrum. And so you find all the names of places. For example, Gangakonda Solapuram is transferred in English as Kangondram. So you find all type of distortion of place names were done because of the domination of the British, and you have dislocation of natives. Now many natives from this local area were transferred to different places so that their language will die and their loyalty to their culture will die, etc. So that is one of the reasons. But there are other benefits also. For example, they were very low in their this thing status, and money was not there, poverty was there, so they were ready to this. So the effect of colonial domination is a racial mixture. For example, the standing example is Anglo-Indians. Even though domination was there were people who were mixing with the native people, and because of that, there is a racial mixture in the Anglo-Indians and language mixture in translated works. Even that one continues now. For example, code shifting, code mixing, butler English, and still the phantom of colonialism continues, and that is the effect you find in colonial domination. And another, these things, the colonial, this thing point out that ideology has some influence over translation. Ideological difference. Now, to take a simple example, I am taking a Tirupurul, one thing. மலர்மிசை ஏகினான் மானடி சேர்ந்தார் நிலமிசை நீடு வாழ்வார் திருக்குறள் 9. அன்பரின் அகமாகிய மலரில் வீற்றிருக்கும் கடவுளின் சிறந்த திருவடிகளை பொருந்தி நிற்கின்றவர் இன்ப உலகில் நிலைத்து நிற்பார். This is one translation. Another is மலர் போன்ற மனத்தில் நிறைந்தவனை பின்பற்றுவோரின் புகழ் வாழ்வு உலகில் நெடுங்காலம் நிலைத்து நிற்கும். So you can find at least I point out two things. Then the first one is concerned with man. அன்பரின் அகமாகிய மலரில் வீற்றிருக்கும் கடவுளை பொருந்தியவர்கள் கடவுளின் திருவடியை பொருந்தியவர்கள் நிலைத்து நிற்பார்கள். That means man will survive, or man will have all sorts of things available to him if he is doing such and such thing. கடவுள். The second thing, மலர் போன்ற மனத்தில் நிறைந்தவனை. Here we are not talking about God at all. Manas, in your mind, who is there? You may have some people as the idea for your in your mind. அவரை பின்பற்றுவோரின் புகழ் வாழ்வு உலகில் நெடுங்காலம் நிலைத்து நிற்கும். So the first one is human related. நிலைத்து நிற்பார் means மனிதர்கள் நிலைத்து நிற்பார்கள். Here we talk about புகழ் நிலைத்து நிற்கும். What is the ideological difference if you find? The ideological difference is one is concerned with the kadavul. The other is not interested in kadavul. It is something else. So you find theism and atheism is being reflected, and one is talking about human beings and the other is talking about the inanimate or non-human aspect, that is pugal. The other one is kadavul. So you will find these ideological differences in translation. That is because of the domination of ideology, etc. So impact of the third point. First, I talked about the worldview has impact over translation. Second, domination has impact over translation that you could look at from the history. Then impact of approaches on translation. So I identify two kinds of approaches which were predominant in those days. For example, your linguistic approaches and cultural approaches. Impact of linguistic approach on translation. Language has a role in translation. Nobody will disagree. And in detecting problems in translations. So one of the main reasons, all the approaches to translation or all the studies of translation were mainly concerned with depicting the different type of problems you encounter due to language. So translation studies were actually studies on the problems of translation forced by languages. So problems may be due to, you might have heard different lectures, even yesterday also you heard, and uh, other people also have pointed out different types of problems in terms of language, forms, in terms of meaning, in terms of function, in terms of varieties, etc. So you have language script is a problem. Sounds will be problems. Words, grammatical categories, phrases, sentences, text, etc. All will be problematic. So you have sound grammatical category. I just one example. Grammatical categories. You have, for example, translation is forced because of the views given. In Tamil, we have a peculiar way of saying certain inanimate things, doing certain animate things. For example, we say, நாடகம் நடந்தது. நாடகத்தை நடத்தினார். So you may say it as intransitive or transitive, whatever. நாடகம் நடந்தது, நாடகத்தை நடத்தினார். Now you will find translation will be difficult. நாடகம் நடந்தது. You translate yourself. நாடகத்தை நடத்தினார். You translate. Okay. Or you have another thing like வாந்தி வரமாட்டேங்குது. If you translate, Vandi means vomit, says that it is not coming. Okay. But if you translate this thing in English, you have to say that I am unable to vomit. So you find this type of distinction, because of the linguistic structures, etc. As far as the words are concerned, you will have different types of problems arise because of collocations, because of metaphorical meaning, polysemous meanings, etc. And other scholars also have discussed all these things. So script, sound, words, grammatical category, everything will be problematic. Referential and speaker meaning. For example, speaker meaning means the implications given by the writer. Even though referential meaning, connotational meanings are covered, the speaker intention is not actually translatable. So that is a problem. You have different type of functions of language: expressive, formative, representational, aesthetic, meta-linguistic functions. You take aesthetic, for example, in the Tamil situation, aesthetics, you have, for example, poetry. You have different types of pa forms for Venba, Kalipa, Asiriyappa, etc. You have different types of stylistic devices like figures of speech, alliteration, assonance, and so many other things. Capturing everything in the translated text is a real problem. And creating meta-linguistic is another problem nowadays you find in this thing. Then language varieties such as spoken, written, literary, geographical variations, social, gender varieties, etc. will be problematic. So linguistic approach has some kind of a role in language, definitely. And main role is to find out what are the problems in translation. So implication for translation is search for varieties of equivalences. And they have also pointed out different types of translations, classification of translation. For example, social translation, socio-linguistic. They say that every society will permit or will not permit the sanction for translation. So a translator should take into account the social aspect of translation. For example, it was reported that in communist countries, the adventure stories of the West, for example, like Tarzan and other type of stories, will not be entertained, will not be translated, due to the fact that this will create some kind of mental colonialism, the colonialism of the mind. The Western values were considered to be very important and other things were degraded. So they did not allow the translation. It was also reported that even the advertisements will be questioned in a Chinese listing. For example, there is a soap advertisement that says that it will change the color of the people. Once they have used this thing, and they found that the color, there is no change in the color. They said that this type of translations will not be accepted. This type of translation will not be accepted, and this type of advertisement also will not be accepted. So we will not use such type of products, that there was an antagonism for this thing. That is because of the translations and the non-reality of what you are translating. Communicated translation, it says translation is of meaning. Hermeneutic translation, it says that translation is communication itself. In that respect, we can say whatever we find in Tamil, for example, commentaries for poetry. It is prose form of rendering in of poetry. We consider it as a translation. Then linguistic translation, taking into account the signifier, sign, and all those things. Literary translation, they say it is the translation of the cultural experience of the people. Semiotic translation, translation and interpretation of text, translation of nonverbal communication, translation of different types of codes, and all these things will come. So you find, because of the linguistic approach to translation, we have several varieties of translations there presented. Concept of shift in translation. You have, when equivalents are not found, you are allowed to make some kind of shifts. That is, a phrase may be converted into a word, or a word may be equated with a sentence even, so shift is possible. And you have different types of shifts presented. Untranslatability was, and NIDA finally comes to the conclusion that there are two factors: linguistic aspect of untranslatability and cultural untranslatability. Okay. And the impact of cultural approach on translation. Cultural studies actually show us cultural problems in translation. Now, if you define culture in a simple way, you can say culture is a set of conventions influencing the attitude of the people, the thinking, behaving, expression of a group. So culture actually controls all kinds of your behavior, your attitude, thinking, etc. So NIDA defines this culture as ecological, material, social, and linguistic. Ecological in terms of ecology, that is how you look at the world, how you look at the fauna and flora, how you look at the world as such. Material means the materials you use in your this thing, for example, implements, different type of cooking materials, then agrarian materials, etc. Social culture means different kind of rituals and different kind of social stratum, social strata, social roles, social systems, etc. Linguistic, of course, you find the systems, linguistic system, linguistic structure, etc. So the way in which you express will be different. I take a material aspect. I'm taking one small example. You may be familiar with conch. Conch, in Tamil we call it changi. Now changi you can use for neck also. You will this thing as neck. Okay, changi. Changi, when a child is born, in olden days, when a child is born, the milk will be given through that conch. Okay. And when a person dies also, the milk or water will be poured into the mouth through this conch. And if he is fully dead, the sound will be produced through this conch. Now, it has a cultural value. The same material you're using, but there is a cultural value. Even in the birth, and even during for the growth, for even at the time of death, you use this thing. So once I asked one Saivite, he told, why? Because of the longevity of this. So for the child also you are giving, for the growth. For the dead also you are doing this thing, because his soul will live longer. And he has quoted one day, Changi Suttalum Vendigal. That means you cannot perish it. You cannot perish it. So the human, again, it gives some kind of ecological and cultural this thing. Culture, with reference to rhetorics, you will find cultural groups have different rhetorical ways. For example, some societies are considered to be logical in expressing things. Some are highly emotional. For example, American society, they say it is a logical society. Everything in terms of cause and effect, and you will have some reason for that. So reason. Emotional, there is no reason, but you will make the people, the feeling will be evoked, emotional. For example, they used to say Martin Luther King's lectures were always emotional in nature. It may not be logical, but logic also will be there if you look at them. Kennedy's speech, you can take Abraham Lincoln's speech. Then cultural means you will find in India, East Asia, and Middle East, you will have the cultural group. Culture means for exposing a particular situation, you present a phrase. There ends the matter. You don't go further. For example, suppose somebody is always complaining for everything, food, they complain this thing. What they do is that Indians as well as in the Middle East and East Asian, they will make use of a simple proverb. They will say, "ஆட தெரியாத நாட்டியக்காரி தெரு கோணல்னு சொன்னாலாம்." That means a person who is always finding fault or grumbling over something, in order to shut up his mouth or in order to show that he is such and such a person, you simply make a proverb. That is, ஆட தெரியாத நாட்டியக்காரி தெரு கோணல்னு சொன்னாங்க. And even they modify also. That is the multiplicity concept comes. They say, பல்லில்லாத பாட்டி முறுக்கு கோணல்னு சொன்னாங்க. So you find different types of, depending upon the culture, you modify even proverbs, and even you modify Tirukkural, you modify everything. Creativity is encouraged in the. And another impact is literary conventions like themes and forms of a group may differ from other conventions, and that cannot be captured, cultural aspects that cannot be captured. So for example, Japanese haiku poetry, what is it? It is famous only for Japanese, and now it is being transferred because of post-colonial or post-structural era. Okay, translation, what is the effect of that? Translation, according to them, is cultural transference. Translation should take into account the scopus. The scopus means the writer's intention, the author's intention, and TL, target language, reader's response also, it should take into account. And translator retains cultural words. How you will maintain the cultural aspect, retain certain cultural words, give cultural notes, preface to translations, so as to make the readers immerse in culture. So consideration of target language reader response for evaluating translation was there as an impact. Cultural roles in foreignization and domestication. That is, Benuti, one scholar, we have pointed out, a translator should identify whether a text should be in foreignized form or domesticated form. Foreignized means Tadbhava form. That is, it may not be read by all the people belonging to a different culture, the target culture. It will look like a foreign text. And domestication means you transform in such a way that you will get the local feel, local appeal, local aesthetics, etc. So a translator has to decide. And another factor is culture actually decides what and what not to translate. For example, many of the translation of communist literatures are, I could say, flops in the early days. Now I don't know, because they were actually very hard to understand. The concept, the understanding is difficult. So translation has an impact over culture. Now, fourth point I would like to is impact of cultural freedom on translation. So because of imperialism, you have some kind of problems in translation. When people are made free, for example, freedom from domination, physical freedom and psychological freedom. Now, physical freedom, psychological for colonization of the mind. One African author reported that the adventure stories translated from the West made the local young population to take lines and appreciate the heroes of the West heroes, that is white heroes, and degrade the local population, the savages. So there is a colonization of the mind, and that has to be avoided. So cultural freedom means you have to free the people from the colonization of the mind. But now Indian situation also, we say the phantom of colonization still continues. Your dress codes, your food habits, your talks and with mixture, and your appreciation for the Western culture, everything, because of that only colonization of the mind. Post-colonial period is a period of cultural revival because domination is overthrown and logocentrism is discarded. Derrida, one of the important literary critic, has pointed out that British imperialism and the Western colonialism has created logocentrism. That means their language was important and superior, their culture was superior, their religion was superior. So that type of logocentrism in giving importance to this thing. Derrida says that should be avoided. So when he's talking about the literary criticism, he says, when the author produces a particular text, he dies at that moment. When the text comes to the reader, it takes life, and that reader will become important. So the reader dies, sorry, the author dies, the original text dies, original culture dies. It lives only through the reader or through the translator. And so don't give importance to the primacy of the text, you give importance to the translated text. And in globalization, nowadays, because of the movement, that is cultural movement, etc., variation in culture was tolerated and it is accepted, and people emphasize that the variation should be brought in your translated text. Not, you need not be faithful to the original. So there is a movement from equivalence to difference. There is don't search for equivalence. Try to present the difference in the text. So what is the impact on translation? Local texts are getting translated nowadays. Rejecting search for equivalence is being done. Emphasis on difference in cultural products and achievements. For example, one case I can point out, for example, Chanakya Arthashastra, you might have heard about him. And there is one important person, by Radhakrishnan. He is actually making use of Chanakya's notions in the management techniques. And nowadays he is being called as a management guru because he presents that Chanakya has several types of techniques to manage the things. So, and Tulgapim revision is nowadays being undertaken. The Sangam classics are being this. Other effects are there, localization of place names. That is because of the domination gone, you have localization. For example, Trivandrum is converted into Thiruvananthapuram. Then you convert Madras into Chennai, Bombay into Mumbai, Calcutta into Kolkata. Okay, you have localization of place. That is because of the distortion of the names which came because of the domination, that is being removed and people try to localize. Local text translation and integration in textbooks and curriculum. That is another important factor. For example, local heroes identified. Some 30 years back, you may not find any inscription, any information in textbooks about the local heroes. For example, even now, you can ask, do you know who Kuili was? Who Marudu Sahodaras? So, local heroes, they were such. For example, Tilladi Valiyaman. Nobody knows. Now, there's a kind of revival. Some of the important heroes were there in Tamil Nadu, and they want to picturize them. Feminism is also given important, and females were allowed to have text creation, etc., etc. Creativity is encouraged through Facebook, WhatsApp. You find multiple types of information. Diversity in information is being brought in because of the removal of colonialism in the case. Now we are coming to impact of man and machine on translation. Now I am not going to talk about machine translation as such, but in what way they differ. I would like to say man's impact. Man was involved in translation activities from ancient days. He has identified that knowledge is very important for translation. Knowledge about two languages, different elements of two languages, knowledge about the culture of the language, knowledge about the literary tradition, etc., intuition. These things are necessary for translation. He has identified time and speed and the quantity of information to be translated, because you have profuse, you have a lot of information available, and they are felt to be as problems because man cannot handle it. So, and man does it somehow, the translation he does it because of this, some kind of subjectivity is involved. And he wants to give this type of subjectivity to the machine so that the machine can do better. Man perceived a lot of things during his course of translation activity. He has identified different things which are problematic, which are to be taken care of, during the translation activity, translation process. For example, as far as the source language is concerned, they have identified you should know the units, you should know the structures of different languages, you should know the meaning, different type of meanings, you know the different type of functions, etc. from the source language. And the same thing in the target language. Then you can do this wonderfully. Source language uses of items. For example, certain items are problematic. And for example, address terms. If we take address terms, you have different types of address terms in Tamil. You may not find that one in English or other. You have different types of names. You call names and other types. Non-verbal acts, different types of acts are there. If in a text, certain things, non-verbal things are reported, while translating this may begin problems. For example, names, different type of implicators are found in this SL uses. Then with reference to author, the meanings conveyed by the author, the contextual meanings, the feelings of the author, the intentions of the author. As far as translator, whether he has to maintain fidelity or freedom or subjective interpretation is encouraged or not, should be taken care of. Target language, if we take, reader response has to be taken care of. Target cultures, expectations, target literary traditions, proverbs, idioms, and all. Literary tradition, I would like to mention here, for example, a Tamil poetry or prose, anything you like. What predominant tendency you find is, before presenting a particular concept, they are always interested in giving it in a comparative form. So, in one of the Kalituve songs, they say that Talaivan is away from Talaivan is away from Talaivis. He says that I am suffering. So to say that the sun was there in the sky, and it has moved through the evening, and it has gone. During the period the sun stayed in the sky, we are happy. When the sun is away at the intermediate period, the people are unhappy. So the sun, then again the moon comes, the people are happy. So this type of comparison they have given to show when Talaivan is there, she was happy, and when Talaivan is not there, she is unhappy when Talaivan again returns. So what I predominantly find is a metaphor, metonymy, opposition in meaning, synonymy in meaning. That is all these comparisons. That is, Uvamai and Uruvagam are considered to be very important aspects in the literary tradition. If you look at, for example, even Tripura, a lot of things were given like that. Sarpilivai, Sahadam, Machirum, Mapandam, Saram. So there he is giving a comparison only, and he is not giving the actual meaning of that. So comparison is considered to be one of the preoccupations of any kind of writer in Tamil, especially the old type of writing. So manual problem still continues to exist. Likewise, machine also. Machine I am not going to talk. Human wish to have a servant to tackle speed and to cover the quantity of information to be translated. So it is a natural trait of human beings to help, to get the help and the aid. So man has to provide knowledge to the computer and train them. There are two possibilities. The computer can do two things. You can correct me because I'm a computer specialist. One, it can match things and do certain things. Or it can analyze things, match, then transfer, do things. So matching is an important aspect. Analyzing and then matching is another. So a man has to provide some kind of information for matching, or train the computer in such a way so that it can. And all the works done by human beings, for example, they concentrated on the lexical and structural aspect of language in the early days. Now you have different, for example, you have different types of translations. So certain creation of WordNet, electronic dictionaries, etc., for lexical recognition by the computer. So for that it is okay. For creation of parallel corpora for structural recognition. For example, different type of structures were identified. Parallelly, they will be, in parallel corpora form, and again the computer will match and try to retrieve this thing in translation process. So this machine impact is making a translation as an objective. Okay. Making machine do what you want by supplying the required knowledge. That is, for example, we have to say, for example, tagging is being done. Tagging means the grammatical knowledge you are giving to the computer through tagging. Parsing, the way in which you parse the groups and then identify the hierarchical representation of the words and formation of phrases, formation of sentences, etc. So you supply some kind of knowledge. Train the machine to get required knowledge and make it do what you want. That means, again, instead of you supplying the information, you make the machine, you train the machine. Again, you require some kind of knowledge supply. Knowledge. So the machine has to recognize, the machine has to understand, then it has to undertake the process of translation. So like human translation, one finds varieties of translation because man is involved. So you have rule-based translation, you use of rules of language. With that, we can construct the systems. Statistics-based large data detecting tendencies, frequency on the basis. Hybrid, there is a rule and statistic procedure together. You have network training-based. You have problems due to delimitation of man. So altogether, nowadays we are passing through a stage of controlling the behavior of the machine so that it can carry out exactly the translation activity. So it has to be seen. It is not full, and we don't have a gestalt view of our translation procedure. And though many people talk about, many people, they were interested in the particular type of actions being done, for example, disambiguation aspect, then anaphora resolution, then you have parsing, then tagging, tokenization. So many small, they actually contribute, but nobody has given a gestalt view of what should take place in a machine translation, this thing. And they find out, they specify the type of problems involved, but they are not giving any kind of practical method to overcome the problem, keeping in mind the total gestalt of machine translation. So we have to work a lot, and we have to have separate kind of logic, etc. That also has to be explained, computer logic, etc., to tackle this problem of translation. The conclusion is, search for equivalence was the beginning of translation. That is based on the worldview. Search for equivalence continues as a non-stop activity with a reference to man and machine. Man and machine struggle to capture equivalence and contextual variance of equivalence. In this struggle, many new concepts evolved. That is the thing. So translation theory and practice is being enriched because of this search. This is the dynamics of intellectual achievement, the progression of science and arts. You are continuously searching for something. And I'm coming to the conclusion. Thank you all for allowing me to talk. Wish you all to have a good translator's brain and spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Participants, any queries? Please unmute your mic.
Selvakumar.
Sir.
Yes.
Shankar Ganesh. Shankar Ganesh, Selvakumar.
Sir, vanakkam sir.
Vanakkam. Sir, எங்க சண்முகம் சார் நம்ம கடைசி வரைக்கும் எங்களை ஸ்டூடெண்டாவே வச்சிருப்பார் போல இருக்கு. வாத்தியார் ஆகிறதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு எப்பவுமே வாத்தியாரா நாங்க ஆக முடியாது போல இருக்கு.
கேள்வி கேளுங்க. அவரை சொல்றதுக்கெல்லாம் you can ask questions so that he will become a student.
Yes sir. But
செல்வகுமாருடைய அந்த இந்த வெபினார்ல நீங்க உங்க பார்ட்டிசிபேஷன் பாக்குறேன். You are giving a lot of information to us.
அது உங்களை இமிட்டேட் பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தாங்களாம். அவ்வளவுதான். இட் இஸ் இமிட்டேஷன். ஒருவேளை உங்களை அப்படியே உள்வாங்கினதுனாலயே என்னமோ சில நேரத்துல எல்லாம். So most of the times we are so compromised with the conflict issues. Maybe that role model we are just taking you as a role model, and in fact உண்மையிலே சொல்ல போனா சில விஷயங்கள் வந்து அவர் சார் ஆசிரியரா இருந்ததை விட I consider him as one of the filial rank. So not only it is a feeling of mine, but also our friends, my colleagues, and those who are student of professor. So when we were there in MA class, we were taught semantics and translation studies. So still it is a very, very apt and close related to the subject of the webinar going on in the Department of Linguistics, that is amalgamation of the world view, whatever the bullet points which he has brought out for us. So they are all very, very the relevant, and the way which he explained, that is what even today morning also I was discussing with Professor Ramurthy sir. So even for any presentation, so even today, so of course we have come across all along the way in our this academic career. So we could not find the way which our teachers drew to let the students to understand any topic, the clarity, and even the simple. If you take a very simple concept, we should be able to let the students to understand at least 30%. But normally it is saying that even the classroom also students, so the learning capacity is 30%. So that the thing still we are learning from our teacher. So how to explain a small thing, a small concept or subject? One should have a definition of knowledge. So very often I used to tell my students also, we should have a definition of knowledge of definition, and getting things to linked to it, the knowledge of connections. These two are very important for a teacher actually. But teaching is a simultaneous learning. So the way which our great teacher taught us for the past one and a half hours, really that both so whether so I just, as I mentioned earlier, whether we should become a teacher or sir, still he is learning so out of the reception. The first point he mentioned that I like ever, the perception, consumption, then the reception. So the perceptions, what we perceived it, the way which we perceive the concept. If someone is trying to let us understand, so that is more important. One should have the dynamism of the dynamic, the capability of telling the things of anything. So in such a way, still we are the students. We feel, we realize that is what I said. Sir never allow us to become a master. So still, whenever I am in front of my teachers, I become nullified, nullified master. So I feel proud, sir. I feel proud that seeing you now. Sir also looks like Noam Chomsky. நல்ல அந்த பியர்ட் எல்லாம் பாக்குறப்ப எனக்கு என்ன, நேற்று சாரை பார்த்த உடனே எனக்கு அதான் ஒரு தோணுச்சு. அண்ட் ஆல்சோ வெரி சார்கிட்ட ஒரே ஒரு விஷயம் என்னன்னா, அன்னையில இருந்து இன்னைக்கு வரைக்கும் மெடிடேஷனா இருக்காரு. ஒரு வகுப்பறையில கற்றல் என்பதே ஒரு மெடிடேஷனா இருந்தாதான் அது சரியான தி நார்மல். ஜென்ரலி தட் ஒரு எஃபெக்டிவ் லேர்னிங் டேக்ஸ் பிளேஸ் when we just realize the teaching and learning is imbibed with that meditating nature. So அன்னையில இருந்து அவர் மெடிடேஷன் பண்ணுவாரு, யோகா எல்லாம் பண்ணுவாரு. அதுதான் ஒரு வேலை ஸ்டாருக்கு கிரெடிபிலிட்டி என்னமோ. I never seen such a professor that only சண்முகம் சார் எல்லாருக்கும் ரீடர், எல்லாருக்கும் நாங்கெல்லாம் டீச்சர் சொல்றது ஒரு ரோல் மாடல். அந்த ரோல் மாடலா எடுத்துக்கிறது ப்ரொஃபஸரை. அது காரணம் என்னன்னா, அவர் எந்த பயாஸுமே he never beyond the never beyond. ஒரு பயாஸ்ங்கிறதே அவர்கிட்ட இருக்காது. ஒரு ஸ்டூடெண்ட் மாஸ்டர்ங்கிறது ஒரு ப்ரொஃபஸர் ஒரு ஸ்டூடெண்ட். அவர்கிட்ட இருந்து நாங்க லேர்ன்டா தான் அன்லேர்ன்டா தான் இன்னமும் நாங்க we just even today we remains as such, that is we realize unlearn whenever we appears in front of Professor Shanmugam sir. அவருக்கு அதுதான் எல்லாத்தையும் பயாஸ் இல்லாத எந்த பயாஸுமே அவர்கிட்ட கிடையாது. இன்னும் படிச்சுக்கிட்டே இருக்காரு. நாங்க ஃப்ரெண்டு மாதிரி. அதான் that is what I mentioned, that I just feel that he is filial rank, filial rank ஃபேமிலியா நான் ஃபீல் பண்றேன். தேங்க்யூ வெரி மச் சார். தேங்க்யூ வெரி மச். தேங்க்யூ டாக்டர் சுப்ரமணி அண்ட் டீம் ஃபார் allowing me to.
Shankar, Sarai?
Dr. Shankar Ganesh. Dr. Shankar Ganesh.
Sir, please, sir. Sir?
I think there are two participants have recorded their questions. Let us give priority to them, and then we can ask question.
Okay.
There are two questions have been recorded. Kindly read out so that they can be answered. No? That is better, I think.
It's in the chat box, right?
Chat box, yeah. Yes.
Shankar, can you read that?
Yes, sir. Sir, first
There
question.
are two
In case of machine translation from Bengal to English, I point out that structure of sentence and meaning is changed. What should be done to correct it, sir?
Okay, when you are translating a particular sentence, you are talking about the sentence translation. Now, sentence is actually composed of the word order should be taken care of. Then the hierarchical organization of the phrases, etc., will have to be taken care of. And within the phrase, you will find different words, right? So, making this into a chunk and transferring the meaning. Sometimes you have to start with only the lexical meaning only. You have to have a primary translation in terms of the lexical items. Now, if you give an example, then I will be able to do that. For example, I will give you the book I am reading is interesting, because I want to translate this. The book I am reading is interesting. Now, while you are translating this one, you have to identify what is the subject of the sentence, what is the predicate. So the book I am reading is considered to be the subject is interesting. So what is the major item in the sentence? The book I am reading. That means book is an important item. The book that I am reading. Now in Tamil, normally we translate this thing as the book I am reading. We translate this as Naan Padikkum Puttagam. So first the book, the book it does it. I am reading. That you have to convert this into a relative class. In English, it is a relative. The book that I am reading, the book which I am reading. So relative class, that we have to convert this in Tamil as the verbal class. Verbal class means the Vinay Echam. Naan Padikkum. Naan Padikkum means it is Peracham, for example. Okay. Naan Padikkum Puttagam, because Puttagam comes later. Naan Padikkum Puttagam, the book I am reading, is good. Nalladu, alladu nandru, etc. So in Nalladu, you also say that it is having this neutral marker, PNG marker, etc. So while you are translating, how will you convert this relative class into an equivalent type of class in Tamil? You have to look after. The predicate, when you are talking about the predicate, what type of PNG markers agreement is there. So all these things you have to keep in mind, and on that basis only you have to make a translation. So taking a likewise several examples you have to take into account. For instance, you have a type of constructions like Vinay Togai in Tamil. Vinay Togai means Padikam, Sudanese. Sudanese. Okay. Sutta neer, Sudugra neer, Sudum neer. It can be expanded like that. Sudanese. How will you translate this thing? warm water. The meaning given by Sudanese will not be captured by warm water, because the Sudanese actually can be expanded as Suttanir, Sudumni. That is translation. Warm water. So if at all you want to capture this in translation, you have to say the water that was warm, the water that is warm, and the water that will be warm. So that type of this type of shifting of the structures will be a problem. And you have to have several other things also. If you have a full corpora, yesterday Ramoti has given you, is it taking a single item which has double meaning and different type of contextual representation for that item, he has given the problems in translation. So if you want to have a concise account of how you have to translate, you have to restrict yourself to a particular item and what type of collocations are there and how the collocational variation is there in other languages. You look at all these aspects in different perspectives, then only a translation will be faithful or will be good too. So with one example, etc., it is not possible to explain this. What we can say is the problem may be due to the shift in the structure. The problem may be due to the shift in the type of meanings that are found for the linguistic items. So structural as well as semantic aspects are involved there. That is the minimum type. Other things, suppose I am telling a sentence with a different type of connotation. For example, he is a very good person. My intention is to show that he is a useless type of person. That meaning you cannot capture in the translation. And only depending upon the context in which the total thing occurs in the conversation or in the text, etc., you will be able to capture the differences. So, your problem you have to tackle on your own. Okay. So you may not be convinced by this thing, but with the simple examples, you cannot explain the problems involved in translation. We can make a generalization and say that due to structural variations in languages, due to lexical variations, lexical meaning variations, etc., taking into consideration all these things only, you can make the translation. Okay.
Shankar, read the next question.
And I have a small request. Can you please stop share the screen so that we can see you?
Yeah, that.
See me.
Yeah, this one you can remove your PowerPoint.
Stop sharing the screen.
PowerPoint you remove by sharing. Remove share
Stop
screen.
sharing.
Remove.
Stop sharing screen. Stop sharing screen is there. You see there, you stop it.
Stop sharing. Yeah. Now I can see.
Now you can see more faces. Shankar, can I ask a question?
Another question is there.
Oh, another question. Read that. After that, my question will be.
He is a research scholar from Bharatiya.
Yeah, correct.
Mr. Kumaraswamy. Yeah. He is there every day asking questions.
Okay.
Someone should read.
Yeah, why don't you read it, Ravi?
Huh? Oh.
Shankar, you can read it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Let him read.
From Bharatiya University. Because of the impact of machine on translation, will artificial intelligence replace innate and acquired intelligence of human beings?
One word answer, no.
A good question.
Okay, sir. Fine. The next question, sir. Umaraj, sir.
Dr. Umaraj. How can we translate the pragmatic information through linguistic units? Normally it is transferred through linguistic units. How can you do it in translation? If I'm right, that is the question.
Now we have to make this thing clear. For example, what is actually pragmatics? Now, normally we say concerned with the. Now, for example, we have two things. We are using the language. Language actually controls one thing, and the person also. For example, you have meaning aspect. I'm taking only meaning. You have the word, and the word has different. Okay, so the part of language, the meaning aspect is part of language that we call read in semantics. And sometimes when you are communicating, besides this meaning of words, for example, the word may have grammatical meaning, the word has and the referential meaning may be connotational or connotational. All these meanings are there. But in communication, sometimes the speech becomes more important, and there is one thing called the speaker meaning. What are the speaker meanings? For example, while he's speaking, the contextual information we will bring in the conversation. So contextual meaning is one thing. The second meaning is presuppositions, certain presuppositions we make. For example, உங்க மகா அமெரிக்காவில் எங்க இருக்கான்னு கேட்கறோம்னு வைங்க. இந்த கான்வர்சேஷன் உங்க மகா அமெரிக்காவில் எங்க இருக்கிறான்னு கேட்கறோம்னு வைங்க. The speaker assumes that the other person's daughter is in America. Unless he has the presupposition, you cannot have the question. For example, உங்க daughter அமெரிக்காவில் எங்க இருக்காங்க. So the person should know, at least he has the presupposition that the daughter of so-and-so is residing in the United States. With that only he is building up the new information. So presupposition is one side. And implication is another. Implication means you have certain, the meanings are not actually conveyed through the linguistic utterances. For example, metaphorical information, or you have, for example, மணி எத்தனை ஒருத்தர் கேட்கறான்னு சொன்னோன்னா நீங்க ஒரு ஆன்சர் கொடுக்குறீங்கன்னு வைங்க, அது சூரியன் தலைக்கு மேல இருக்கு. So what is the meaning of சூரியன் தலைக்கு மேல இருக்கு? சூரியன் தலைக்கு மேல இருக்குன்னா the sun is on the top. That's all. And what do you imply? சூரியன் தலைக்கு மேல இருக்குன்னா மணி 12 இருக்கும். So he has asked it for giving an answer. This is an implication. The answer that you are giving is implication, right? So you have contextual meanings, presuppositional meanings, implicational meanings, and you have another type of meaning, that is this socio-cultural type of meaning. You may not find it in the type of phrases, etc. So a speaker, when he is involved in speech, he gives his own speech besides the meaning of the items. So that is called the pragmatic type of information. Now, how to incorporate the pragmatic information? How we will incorporate it while you are translating? The speaker is saying that Talaki Mela Suryan. How will you translate? On the top of our head there is what type of implication it has? We cannot. The machine cannot do that. Machine cannot do that, and we also cannot do that. Why? Because the sun is on the head is one interpretation. Suppose the other person interprets that he is not interested in giving the answer. So that is another type of interpretation. So we have to see what are the possible type of implications one could make out of a particular. If that can be tracked, that can be identified, and then that type of information is provided to the computer, then you will have a different type of dictionary or different type of corpora element required. For lexical meaning, etc., you can have the dictionaries for electronic dictionary or network, etc. You have word network, etc. will be available. But for introducing such type of meaning from the communication situation, the meaning from the communication situation or meaning given by the speaker in a communicative situation. You have to identify, that identification is a real problem, I think. So we pragmatic, for example, you take pragmatic information means while you are talking, I'm showing the hand like this. And while you are writing the text, he showed his hand from hand movement from left to right in order to avoid something. How will you translate this? Suppose I am doing like this. It is occurring in the text. How will you cannot translate, because I might have done it just to send a fly, or I might have used this thing just to avoid the smell, the filthy smell coming from outside, or I want to avoid a particular person. So there are different type of meaning and interpretations could be given in the speech context by the speaker, by the hearer. So we have to have a separate kind of corpus being built so that it can be done. Are you convinced, Dr. Umaraj?
Sir, thank you very much.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, Narana Sabha.
Sorry, yeah.
How are you, sir? so very nice. Just I want to share some of my views which you can clarify.
Yeah. Here. Faint voice.
For example, comment Holga.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Voice is very low.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me now?
No. Yeah, I can hear.
Yeah.
The voice break.
Now, okay.
It's very low, sir. A little louder, please.
Now,
yeah. Please. Go ahead, sir. Yes.
Suppose, for example, Tolgapiyam, we have different commentaries for the Tolgapiyam. And then for one and the same language, it's a kind of translation we have told actually. And for one and the same language, even for the native speakers, we are able to give one or more than one interpretation.
Yeah.
And we leave alone the other language. But as in the same language itself, that's the problem. This is one how it can be explained. Another is applied linguistics. For example, the translation is called applied linguistics from the point of view of taking different theories from different language, different linguistic theories. We use it in the translation process. But at the same time, when it goes to the machine, we are adding one more dimension to that. That is, the machine comes in, technology comes in, and other things. Therefore, the applied language scope of the applied linguistics expands. And can we call this as applied linguistics, or it goes beyond linguistics? It's one thing question, sir. And another thing is that I have told this is what you told is I forgot. This. The one thing is now what we are giving used based on the data or other rule-based translation. We are using only the what linguistics information gives, but we are not using how this linguistic information used. Only the language, what language is we are using, but how actually it is language is not there actually without use. Therefore, how the language is used, you have to take into account, and those information that is language use has to be given, and that is where the other things are coming in. That's what I mean. Normally, these descriptive and other something, any linguistic grammar gives linguistic information. It doesn't go beyond sentence and all this. But how it is used once, then you go beyond sentence. How this language is used, we go beyond sentence. And that's why the question is whether it is what, concerned with what, or whether it's concerned with how we are using it. And that is what is my question, sir. And please, can you clarify that with that, sir?
The first question you have asked is about the relationship between literary text and the prose commentary. So this the difference, do you consider the commentary as a translation of the poetic text? That is what you have asked first. No? Within the language itself, a poetic form is converted into a prose form, whether it is a translation or not, right?
Yeah.
So Roman Jakobson has classified translation under three major headings. He said one is interlingual translation, translation between two languages. Intralingual translation, translation within the language itself. That is why I consider that the commentaries given by the commentators for the poetry is also considered to be a translation. Because he has pointed out intralingual translation is possible. The second is interlingual between English and Tamil, for example.
But
Then
I have one interpretation. Can I interfere? Can I interfere? Sir?
Yeah.
One thing is, suppose leave alone the Tolkapian, and suppose you take the modern day court language, lawyers are arguing in the same language, and one and the same point, one lawyer perceives it in one way and interprets it in another way, and another lawyer interprets it in the same way, another way, and how it happens, that is the same way. Leave alone the point. Yeah.
Okay. Interpretation, different type of interpretation. That is because yesterday also Ramurthy pointed, language has a flexibility in such a way that there is a lot of scope for interpretation. For example, I give you a small this thing. John said, Mary is good. Okay, you take the sentence. John said Mary is good. John, said Mary is good. Do you find the difference between these two?
Yeah.
John said Mary is good.
Then what I would say is the written language is not a complete form of spoken language. It is not fully represented. What all is not fully represented in your written language. That is why the problem comes. In the spoken language, you may have this past, transition, and all these things you may have. But in the written language, it's not a full representation of the spoken language.
That's good. So what I'm trying to say is, even in the legal interpretations, because of the a long sentence with the different clauses are there, and if you interpret the clauses in different ways, definitely you will get a different type of interpretations.
I see.
So different type of interpretation because of the class differences. You know, the class we put. So one concrete example from the legal translation I give you. There was a dispute between the elder brother and younger brother. There was a will written, and in the will it is said to the elder brother, "Nee virumbugiradai un thambikku kodu." It's a will. One lawyer interpreted this thing as "Nee virumbugiradai" means whatever you wanted to give to the student, to your brother, you give. Nee virumbuvathai un thambikku kodu. Another lawyer interpreted Nee virumbuvathai thambikku kodu. That means whatever you want to have, that thing you have to give to the. You understand the difference between? So the way in which you understand that one.
Yeah, the transition, the transition which from one sound to another, there is a transition way of representing the activity is there. Practically, that juncture or pass or transition, what we call it as transition from one sound to the other. It takes place in one case in the other place, in another case in another place. It takes place.
That type of difference comes because language permits such type of ambiguous construction. Because of ambiguity, when the lawyers are in a position to interpret according to their fancy. Okay? That's one. Again, translation also possible that occurs. And you talked about applied linguistics, whether it is the translation is an applied linguistics, and how you give the information to the computer. That is another question you have raised. How to interpret, how to give the information. Now, many people were, as I already pointed out,
Louder, please.
Many people were interested in giving the problems they encounter when they give the information to the machine. The different type of problem. For example, how to disambiguate information, how to the anaphora resolution, and how to giving tagging phenomenon. all these problems they are discussing, but still we are not having a gestalt view of what is required for a machine learning, because it is an ongoing type of research, and somewhere some portions were being discussed, and there is no gestalt notion of this thing, and it will also differ. Machine translation also will differ from cognate language, when applied to cognate languages and when applied to non-cognate languages. You have a lot of problems. The problems are not this thing. As you have pointed out, it is an ongoing type of research. There is no conclusion. There is no concrete view at this moment. Okay. And whatever translation, the successfulness of the translation, you find only in the restricted type of, for example, certain brochures are translated, certain advertisement captions are translated, some paragraphs of science. These are restricted type of translations. And when you come to literature and other bigger domains, etc., translation is yet to see the light of the day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
என்ன ரவி நீங்க கொண்டு கேக்குறீங்களா?
சொல்லுங்க.
நான் கேட்கவா? நீங்க கேளுங்க. இல்ல
நான் கேட்கல.
நான் என்ன கேக்குறதா? சரி ப்ரொஃபசர், we were discussing about fidelity, what is that? Freedom, faithfulness, variation, etc. Okay. Now I have a small question about Kavimani's translation. வெயிற்கேற்ற நிழல் உண்டு, வீசும் தென்றல் காற்று உண்டு, கையில் கம்பன் கவி உண்டு, கலந்து பேச நீ உண்டு. This is not exactly the translation. Where will you place this one? Whether he had the freedom to translate or the freedom of having the target language or the source language, etc. This is my simple question. And another question after that I'll ask.
It is freedom only. We call it as creation or recreation. Kavimani was actually influenced by the Indian worldview. Indian worldview is for multiplicity, diversity. So they don't consider that the original was actually original. Okay, it is written. But when it is written, you need not have to translate. No. When you say Kayil
Kamban Kavi undu. Kayil Kamban Kavi undu. Kavi undu.
Book of verses beneath the bow. அங்க இருக்கக்கூடியது a book of verses beneath the bow. அங்க அவர் கவிதையோ அல்லது அரேபியன் நைட்ஸ்ல உள்ள இதையோ எதையும் சொல்லல. கையில் a book of verses poetry, a book of verses beneath the bow, a jug of wine besides me, அந்த மாதிரி போகுது பிக்சராலஜி. இவர் என்ன சொன்னார்? கம்பன் கவியுடைய கம்பன் புக் ஆஃப் போய்ட்ரி இருக்குன்னு, சங்கம் போய்ட்ரி என் கையில இருக்குன்னு சொல்ல வேண்டியது. கம்பனை மாத்திரம் எடுத்தாரு. ஏன்னா கம்பனை எடுத்தா ரசம், வேற எந்த லிட்ரேச்சர்லயும் அந்த ரசத்தை பார்க்க முடியாத. கம்பன் கவி, அதுக்கப்புறம் எங்க மர நிழல்ல நீங்க சொல்லுங்க, கையில் கம்பன் கவி உண்டு, கலசம் நிறைய மது கலசம் நிறைய மது உண்டுன்னு சொன்னாரு. அவன் என்ன சொன்னான்? புக் ஆஃப் வெர்சஸ் beneath the bow, ஜக் ஆஃப் வைன். அவன் ஏன் ஜக் ஆஃப் வைன் சொன்னான்? இங்க நமக்கு ஒயினே கிடையாது. நமக்கு நல்ல ஒரு நல்லா இருக்கும் தானே நமக்கு. So actually made domesticated their poem. Domestication. ஒரு என்ன சொல்றாருன்னா, whether a translator has to make a decision whether the translation should be a foreign one or a local one. Whether it is foreignization has to take place, or localization or domestication has to take place. இப்போ டொமஸ்டிகேஷனுக்கு ஒரு எக்ஸாம்பிள்லாம் கொடுத்துருவாரு. இப்போ ஒரு கிளி ஏன்னா அது பறந்து போறதுக்கு தான் அதனுடைய டெண்டன்சியா இருக்கும். அதை டொமஸ்டிகேட் பண்றேன்னா என்ன பண்றீங்கன்னா, நீங்க அதை தோல்ல எடுத்து வச்சுட்டு அது பறக்காது. அதை டொமஸ்டிகேட் பண்ணிட்டீங்கன்னா, அத மாதிரி இந்த லோக்கல் பீப்புள் அக்செப்ட் பண்ணணும்னு சொன்னா you have to domesticate the poetry. So அதனாலதான் அவர் கம்பன் விதை இதுக்கப்புறம் கலசம் நிறைய ஏன்னா சொன்னா நம்ம ஆளுங்க. So that is the reason.
Then
why
can I say that he was faithful to the target language and not to the source language?
he is faithful to the target.
That's the thing, isn't it? So culture and this one, he was faithful.
Faithful to the translation.
So one faithful means
You should be faithful to both.
இல்ல faithful to both. அவங்கள வந்து அவுட்வார்ட் ஒதுக்கி வச்சு நான் வந்து மணிப்பிரவாள ஸ்டைல்ல பேசுறேன்னு வைங்களேன், என்ன ஒதுக்கி வச்சு இவரை கொஞ்சம் தள்ளி வச்சிருக்கோம்னு சொல்லுவாங்க.
சரி, இப்போ
ஆல்சோ
tell me. My second one is only a very simple one. We have now what is that, sign language corpus with CIL under the head of Dr. Ramamurthy. It was prepared, collected. Can we translate the sign language into whatever be the language? And how will you go about it?
How will you go? That is it.
Because the sign language also has a lot of regional variations.
Sign language, you're talking about the deaf and dumb sign or?
No, not that. Deaf and dumb, okay, take it like that. Sign, that's it, sign language. Deaf and dumb.
Sign, for example, you put this sign. Sign language, we are reading the news. That means we are using it for Talaistanam, that is the parliament and other decision making. For that they say. So you have to take that, you convert that into right. That is keeping your head on the finger is the sign. And what it actually stands for, it stands for any kind of organization or the place where decision is being made. It may be parliament, it may be Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, or an institution where the decision is being made. So likewise, first you convert this into a local language, that is keeping the hand on the head, that is a sign. And what type of translation? An important institution where decision is being made is the translation. And to expose that further, you have different type of corpus entries if they are coming. You have to say that it is Lok Sabha, it may be a parliament and even American parliament or European nation or WHO, World Health Organization. So you can have different type of variants of that. But the one common meaning you try to give and identify this. So every sign has to be rendered in the written form first. The meaning has to be rendered in the phrasal form.
I raised the question just because, like language variations, signs also have a lot of variations. For example, if you say like this, it's a woman. For us, if you say that tilak, it's a woman. For us, mustache is a man. And for them, the sideburns is. So what happens ultimately? Are you talking about this one or this one, etc.? A lot of variations will be there. That's why I'm telling the same difficulty may be there also. Right? Okay. That's all, Professor.
Shall I ask one question? I have a question. Shall I ask?
Yeah, okay. Can
Very simple question. So when does a translator go for a free translation? There is a phrase I have come across, free translation. What does it stand for? And when does a translator choose this kind of this type of translation?
Other than that, the decision will be made only by the translator. Whether he has to safeguard the original or whether he can be free, whether he has to take into account the literary conventions of the society, and whether he has to take into account the reader response from the target language. All these things, it is only through intuition we are able to do that. For example, நீங்க சொன்ன அந்த போயம் இருக்கு பாருங்க, அது என்ன நீங்க நம்ம தமிழ் ஸ்காலர்ஷிப் கொடுத்தீங்கன்னா, வெயில் கேட்ட நிழல் வந்து அது அதனுடைய சந்தம் நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா, அந்த சந்தம் இருக்கு பாருங்க, அது வந்து ஏதோ ஒரு பாவ இனத்துல அது போய் சேரும். அது வந்து ஆசிரியப்பா, வெண்பா, வஞ்சிப்பா, கலிப்பான்னு நம்ம ஏதோ பா வகைகள்லாம் இல்லையா? ஃபேவரட்டா உள்ள கலர் வந்து பென்டா. எங்க இங்கிலீஷ்ல நீங்க வந்து அந்த பென்டா அந்த 5 சிலபிள் வர்ற மாதிரி பென்டா, இதுதான் அவங்களுடைய டைப் ஆஃப். நமக்கு பென்டாமீட்டர். யா, நம்ம திருக்குறள் எடுத்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா நமக்கு வந்து இது ஹைக்கூ இல்ல. ஆக்சுவலா இட் இஸ் நாட் ஹைக்கூ, பட் we have a வெண்பா form in 2-line poetry. It is nowhere it is found, this type of poetry, just like இந்த poetry, இது haiku poetry in Japan. So இது வந்து நம்முடைய லிட்டரரி, அந்த லிட்டரரி கன்வென்ஷன் நம்ம மாத்தணும். அந்த சந்தம் போட்டு பார்த்தாலே நமக்கு தெரியும். இத இப்போ கேட்டு நிழல் வந்து வீசும் தென்றல் காற்று வந்து வெயில் கேட்கணும், நீங்க தட்டி பார்த்தாலே தெரியும். பாரதியுடைய போயம் பூரா அப்படிதான் இருக்கணும். அவர் வந்து முதல்ல சொல்ல கும்மி அடிச்ச மாதிரி நீ பாட்டுனா என்னுடைய பாட்டெல்லாம் நீங்க படிக்க சிந்து, அந்த மாதிரி காவடி சிந்து, அந்த சிந்து, இந்த மாதிரி அவரு சொல்லுவார். சோ தட் இஸ் கன்வென்ஷன். அதுல நீங்க கொடுத்தா தான் இவனுக்கு போய் சேரும். இப்ப நீங்க இப்ப உள்ள தமிழ் பாடலையும் இருக்கு பாத்தீங்களா, கண்ணதாசன் பாடல், இப்ப அழுக பாடல், அதெல்லாம் இல்லை. இப்ப பாத்தீங்கன்னா நீங்க டப்பு இந்த குழந்தைகள் அது என்ன டக்கர 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 டக்கரன்னுட்டு போகுது. அது என்ன இந்த கான்செப்ட் அது நமக்கு புரியல. பட் அந்த சந்தத்தை இவங்க விரும்புறாங்க. அது மாதிரி இங்கிலீஷ் கலப்பு எல்லாமே, ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் மிக்சிங், இதெல்லாம் இருக்கு இல்லையா. ஒரு 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 பிலிம் போயம் பாத்தீங்கன்னா அனுபவத்து தானே பண்ணியிருக்கான். அந்த விஜய் பாடின மாதிரி ஒரு பாட்டு ஃபுல்லாவே இங்கிலீஷாவே இருக்கு. தமிழ் மெட்டுல அது இங்கிலீஷ்ல இருக்கு. பாத்தீங்களா, ரீசெண்டா நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா தெரியும். ஸோ அந்த மெட்டில நம்ம இது பண்ணணும். அதை லிட்டரரி இதெல்லாம் எடுத்துதான் நம்ம டிரான்ஸ்லேஷன் பண்ணோம்னா இட் இஸ் டிசைடட். டிரான்ஸ்லேட்டர் வந்து ரொம்ப கல்ச்சரலி இமர்ஸ்ட் பர்சனா இருந்தான்னு நினைக்கிறேன். அவன் he will distort it to the ஏன்னா கம்யூனிஸ்ட் லிட்டரேச்சர்லாம் நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா, நீங்க டைரக்டல் மெட்டீரியல்ஸ் அல்லது ஹிஸ்டாரிக்கல் மெட்டீரியல்ஸ் எல்லாம் நீங்க அதை எடுத்து டிரான்ஸ்லேஷனை நீங்க படிச்சு பாத்தீங்கன்னா, நீங்க ஒரு பக்கம் படிச்சுக்கிட்டு அப்படியே தூக்கி வச்சிருக்கீங்க. Why? Because it is considered to be a foreignized text. It does not talk about the local, அந்த இவனுக்கு புரியாத மாதிரி வராது. So it all discarded. Have you ever?
Yeah. I have seen. Yes. I have seen such a translation. Yes.
மாஸ் கேபிட்டலுக்கு டிரான்ஸ்லேஷன் நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா ஒரு பக்கம் படிச்சு முடிச்ச உடனே நீங்க அதை வச்சு போடவே மாட்டீங்க. ஏன்னா அந்த லோக்கல் அந்த நேட்டிவைசேஷன் அதுல வர அளவுக்கு இருந்தா தான் என்டர்டெயின். ஸோ அதனால ஃபார் யுவர் கொஸ்டின், தி வெதர் வாட் done when a translator becomes a good person, it is decided by him only. If he is pro for, okay, if he is against nativization, so it is depending upon his own decision.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
செல்வகுமார் ஏதோ பேசுறாரு பாருங்க. சங்கர்
செல்வகுமார் சார்,
ஆக்ஷன் மட்டும் தான் தெரியுது.
அன்மியூட் சார். செல்வகுமார் சார், நீங்க பேசுறது கேட்கலைங்க சார். அன்மியூட் பண்ணுங்க சார், ப்ளீஸ். அன்மியூட் ஒரு மைக்.
மைக் அன்மியூட் பண்ணிக்கிறாரு.
Meanwhile, can I say something? Can I come in?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, actually, I don't have any question, but I have a view. So I would like to share regarding the Nandaraja Pillai, sir.
Please introduce yourself. Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Ganesh, sir. Actually, the thing is that whatever Nandaraju Illai sir said about sign language translation. This one is like quite tricky and interesting phenomena, we can say, or it can be uprising or upcoming discipline, we can say. But at the same time, when we say the parallel discipline to the translation, that is interpretation. But as far as sign language is concerned, this could be like sign language translation won't be possible. Means like I am saying in a like a midway. I'm not placing the sentence in a strong manner. Not possible is its meaning is that it can be interpreted, because the way interpretation itself is the allied discipline to the translation. In the same manner, the sign language's variations and the sign language itself can be having its own discipline with some sort of interpretation, because it doesn't have words. Words can be helpful, or sentence can be helpful for making translation. Word to word translation, lexical translation, semantic translation, or pragmatical translation. When pragmatical translation or when pragmatics comes, over there one needs to have the foregrounding or backgrounding of cognitive domain, cognition. So over here, the whole sign language discipline or the phenomena or the allied whatever academia do stand on the basis of cognition. As far as the interlocutor of sign language and sign language speaking, or whatever we can say, the first sign language person and the other would be the interlocutor. In my view, whatever understanding I have, that is what I do see. I'm not making any comment. Just I'm expressing my views in front of you.
Thank you.
It is also a critical field. I'm interested in the news reading, for example. When somebody is reading the news in English or in Tamil, etc., a person who is deaf and dumb, he tries to give some kind of information through the different types of signs. How that person understands that is actually a problem. So if a person could understand the actual language, that is the spoken language, and convert this into some kind of sign system also can be, logically speaking, science system also can be translatable. That is the novel, a logical type of conclusion we come to. So it is a fertile field, as you have pointed out. It is a fertile field where a lot of things will have to be done in the future. And as you pointed out, it will differ from culture to culture. The type of science people use, for example, you have non-verbal communication, non-verbal science. If you look at the languages, it will differ from language to language, culture to culture. So, if you want to have, you should also kind of corpus about it. Ways in which the body and face, this posture, location, then the kinesics. You have two types of things to sign this in the pain. The movement of the body is they call it posture and kinetics. There will have to be, we have some kind of data, we should have some kind of purpose for that. And then we can continue with this type of work. It's a long time. I can put it a long way.
Yeah. Thank you, Ganesh.
Shankar, Sam Mohanlal wanted to ask some in the middle somewhere. Dr. Sam Mohanlal wanted to ask something, but I don't know whether he wants now or not, but still just an information.
எனக்கு இது இல்ல ஒர்க் ஆகுதுன்னு நினைக்கிறேன். கேக்குதா பேசுறது? கேக்குதா? Okay. So if you can listen, yeah, that's thank you, Natarajan. I was thinking of asking the concept of ideological variations in translation Shanmugam was talking about. That actually can be disastrous, don't you think so? Because original text, you have mentioned about the Tirukural, to on same Tirukural, how it can be translated in a two different ideological format. So why I say
yeah.
Pardon?
No, that Tirukural
whatever it may be. So
yes.
total ideological variation can be disastrous. A person X, the original text written by X, translated by Y with entirely different ideological perception or ideological view can totally distort the audience. How this can be manipulated or how this can be set right, Professor Shanmugam? Do you have? I'm just trying to find out.
Only the society which has to do this. That's what I give you. Actually, who asked second ideology. உனக்கு மனசுக்கு பிடிச்சவன நீ இது பண்ணிக்க அப்படின்னா எனக்கு மனசுக்கு எங்க வாத்தியார் நல்லா இருக்காருன்னு நான் பிடிக்குதுன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்களேன். அவருடைய அதனால வரக்கூடிய உனக்கு அவனை பின்பற்றி நடக்கிறதுனால வரக்கூடிய புகழ் உனக்கு உயர்ந்து நிற்கணும்னு சொல்றாங்க. So this there is a difference in the ideological, there are so many other texts also you will find the ideological differences. That is because the culture actually accepts that one. இப்போ கலைஞருடைய டிரான்ஸ்லேஷன் நிறைய பேர் படிக்கிறாங்க எடுக்கிறாங்க எல்லாம் இருக்கு. அதே மாதிரி நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா அந்த ராமாயணம் கதைகளை பாத்தீங்கன்னா நீங்க அண்ணாதுரையுடைய ஒரு டிஸ்கிரிப்ஷன் பாத்தீங்கன்னா கம்பரசம்னு கொடுத்துருப்பாரு. அதுல அவரு ரொம்ப கிரிட்டிக்கலா இருப்பாரு. அதுல சில போர்ஷன்ஸ் எல்லாம் டிரான்ஸ்லேட் பண்ணி ரொம்ப கிரிட்டிக்கலா போட்டுருப்பாரு. That is accepted because the society was very calm, was silent. This thing, there was no revolt. Adhanala, an ideology also can influence the translation. That is the only thing I wanted to say. But either one thing discard definitely it distorts the original thing. Other distortion avoid naturally the culture of the society will have to take some kind of steps. That's all. Society, if it is acceptable to the society, will continue to exist. The translation also will continue to exist. So the society accept or reject other concept. Ideology can bring differences in translation. Ideology. That is the point. அதே மாதிரி இந்த மிக்சிங் அவாய்ட் பண்ண முடியாது. நீங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னா வேளாங்கண்ணியில போனீங்கன்னா வேளாங்கண்ணியில நானே பார்த்திருக்கேன். அந்த இது கொடுக்க மாதிரி, அதாவது ஹிந்துஸ் அண்ட் அதர் பீப்புள் ஆல்சோ கோ. எனக்கு தெரிஞ்சு ஒரு ஃப்ரெண்டு மெழுகுவர்த்தி கொடுக்கணும்னு இருந்தா கூட அவர் என்ன பண்ணாரு, அந்த மெழுகுவர்த்திக்கு மேல ஒரு சூடத்தை வச்சு கொடுத்தாரு. எனக்கு சூடத்தை வச்சு கொடுத்தா தான் நான் கடவுளை தரிசித்த மாதிரி ஆகுது சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு தடவை வச்சு கொடுத்தேன் படிக்கக்கூடிய நேரத்துல. That means there is a cultural this thing. You take the item, rituals are இதெல்லாம், and you convert your own cultural இதெல்லாம் அதுல நீங்க கொடுக்குறீங்க. அது உங்க இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட்டுக்குன்னு நீங்க சொல்வீங்க. அதுவும் ஒரு sort of imposition தான். So there are so many things. கல்ச்சர்னு வரும்போது there are so many things. ஒன்று ராங்கா இருக்கிறது மாதிரி படம், பட் இருந்தாலும் கூட we have to, the culture has to accept, our culture has to do that. Society is responsible for that. Mohan?
Yeah, thank you very much. கேக்குதா? Yeah, it's okay. Fine. Thank you,
sir. Okay, sir.
Excellent exposition, Shanmugam. I enjoyed. Really, as usual, I enjoyed your talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. formal word of thanks. Good evening, one and all present here. First of all, I thank our head of the department for giving this opportunity to propose a formal word of thanks. Today, successfully going on 6th day translation webinar. I would like to thank today resource person Dr. Shanmugam, professor, former professor and head Department of Linguistics, Bardiyar University, for his dynamic talk on the title Perspectives of Translation. He explained in detail about impact of word view translation and Indian word view translation, types of equivalents, and also he covers this topic, impact of dimension of translation and different types of translations, and also ideology affecting translation, impact of approaches on translation. He's explained classification of variety of translation and impact of man machine translation, and also covered impact of cultural approaches on translation. And thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And I thank all the senior professors, Dr. Nadana Sabavi sir, Deva Sundaram sir, Ramurthy sir, Narajapalli sir, Ravi Shankar sir, Muralidharan sir, Muthukrishnan sir, Selvakumar sir, Shyam Mohan sir, Maharaj sir, and Prem Kumar. Also, I thank all professors and my colleagues and participants from various universities and colleges. Once again, I thank you all. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
வணக்கம்
வணக்கம் ஐயா.
சார் எல்லாருக்கும் நன்றிங்க சார்.
எல்லாருக்கும் நன்றி. தேங்க்யூ ப்ரொஃபசர். ரொம்ப நல்லா இருந்துச்சு, பார்க்கலாம். சார் நடனசபாதி சார் எப்படி இருக்கீங்க? எல்லாரும் மைக்க ஆஃப் பண்ணி வச்சுட்டாங்க. யார் யார் இருக்கிறாங்க தெரியாது. சரி சங்கர், பார்க்கலாம். ப்ரொஃபசர் பார்க்கலாம்.
Thank you sir. எல்லாருக்கும் thank you very much for everything.
Thank you sir. Thank you sir. Thank you so much sir.
Okay. Shankar Ganesh. Yeah. Very good. Vote of thanks. Very nicely presented, Shankar Ganesh.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Very good. Nice. I could see so many faces. My face is not visible. I have not opened it.
Okay. Ravi Shankar wants to say something.
No, thanks to Simon.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. See you.
Sorry, I am leaving now.
Okay.